Hello, in this lesson we will be discussing Gestalt principles. And Gestalt principles is a term which means unified whole, and it refers to theories of visual perception that was developed by the German psychologists in the 1920s. So these ideas or theories kind of describe how people tend to kind of organize visual elements into groups or unified wholes. So when these certain principles are applied, and so that there are a number of different principles that define Gestalt. The first one is similarity, and similarity occurs when the objects look similar to one another. And people often sort of like perceive them as a group or a pattern. Here's an example here of that principle. And so it contains, as is noted here, 11 distinct objects, and which appear as a single unit because all of the shapes have something in common with one another, which is similarity. And so unity occurs because the triangular shapes at the bottom of the eagle symbol look similar to the shapes that form the sunburst around the perimeter of the eagle's head. So when this principle occurs, an object can be emphasized if it is dissimilar to the other objects. This is called an anomaly. The next principle that we'll be looking at is continuation. And before I talk about that, one other note I'd like to make about similarity. And the top illustration here shows a figure on the far right, which becomes a focal point because it is dissimilar to the other shapes. So again, this is how this principle of similarity works. The next principle is continuation. And continuation occurs when the eye is kind of compelled to sort of like move through one object and continue to another object. And so in this example here of the letter H and the leaf, the viewer's eye, because the viewer's eye will sort of like naturally follow a line or a curve, the smooth flowing crossbar of the H leads the eye directly to the maple leaf. The next principle is closure. A closure occurs when an object is incomplete or a space is not completely enclosed. And so if enough of the shape is indicated, then people kind of perceive the whole by filling in the missing information. So I'll just kind of show you an example of that would be this panda, for example, is not complete. But there's enough information for the eye to kind of complete the shape. So when the viewer's perception completes a shape, then the closure occurs. And the same for this small little mosaic logo type down at the bottom of this page. The next principle is proximity. And so proximity occurs when elements are placed close together and they tend to kind of be perceived as a group. For example, in this above illustration, the 9 squares are placed without proximity and they are perceived as separate shapes. So when the squares in the bottom example are given close proximity, then the unity occurs. While they sort of like continue to separate shapes, they are now kind of perceived as one group. And again, for this illustration, as you see here at the bottom of the page, the 15 figures above form sort of like a unified whole. So and then it also forms the shape of a tree because of their proximity. The next important principle of Gestalt is figure ground. So when the eye kind of differentiates an object form to its surrounding area, and so that a form or silhouette or shape is naturally perceived as a figure, which is the object, while the surrounding area is perceived as ground or the background. So kind of balancing figure and ground can make the perceived image more clear. Using sort of like an unusual figure-ground relationships can really add interest and a subtlety to an overall image. So the word above, for example, the word figure, is clearly perceived as figure, with the surrounding white space, which is the ground. And oftentimes it's been noted that, some of the more strongerly designed typefaces, such as Helvetica, the Swiss designers kind of pay attention to the background space, and which then ultimately forms the letter forms. And so there's this really strong dynamic black and white or figure ground relationship that occurs. In the image at the bottom of this illustration here, at the bottom of the page, the figure and the ground relationships change as the eye perceives the form of the shade or the silhouette of the face. So there's a sort of like a duality that's kind of happening in this image. And then furthermore, the image here, this image of this illustration uses a more kind of complex figure-ground relationship, which changes upon the perceived leaves, the water, and the tree trunk. So in review, the Gestalt principles that we looked at are similarity, proximity, continuance, closure, and figure and ground. And so these are the general principles that we will be applying as we move forward with our Gestalt studies for module number 5 and module number 6. So more about that shortly. Thank you.